Hello, my fellow wealth hackers, and welcome to another episode of the Truth About Real Estate Investing show. My name is Rowan Cito, and you know those career moments you have once in a while? Well, back when I worked in corporate for Big Blue, I worked there for 7 years. I was making the jump to becoming a realtor full time. I identified one of my greatest weaknesses as being negotiations. I'm just a shy person by nature. So I attacked that weakness by reading books and taking courses on the subject, believing that all skills can be learned. Next, my mentors and Tom and Nick Karadza of Rockstar Real Estate told me the most important part of business is marketing, specifically direct marketing and lead generation. So I attacked that pretty hard too to become what I believe is a decent marketer. Then it was sales skills next, and I hired the top realtor coach in Canada and surrounded myself with some unbelievable sales professionals, and I acted like a sponge. About 6 weeks ago, without any planning really, we bought a house in Oakville, Ontario, because it was very nicely renovated. More importantly, it had a pool for the kids and a view of the water for Cherry. So I negotiated to win, and we won that house. We weren't going to lose. I played to win. It's how I've lived a lot of my life, and it's worked out pretty well in a lot of areas of my life. Next, we had to sell our house to pay for the new house. So we sold, donated, or gave away about half of our belongings. I'm honestly bad at throwing stuff out. My closet was way too full of clothes that I hadn't worn since, some of them not since high school, so it's been quite a while. Our kids have been lucky to be on the receiving side of a lot of hand-me-downs and generous gift-giving friends and relatives. So we had to get rid of a lot of that stuff too. So we did that. We did some minor renovations that added up to over $10,000. I spent another $10,000 on professional photography, drone video, videography, staging, a hotel room for my family and my nanny's family for a week. That was $10,000 in itself. Thankfully, I had a good realtor who paid for all this. Over 4 days of showings, we had 66 showings, 4 offers. Fun, useless fact of the day, I believe because our house, we did so little renovations, was the reason why we didn't draw more offers. But that was okay. It went out quite well. I used my communication skills and my negotiation skills to the best of my ability, like I always do. I played a win, and we managed a new neighborhood high for the style of my home. And overall, my house is the number 3 of all time for our neighborhood and sale price. And again, we didn't renovate much. The number 1 selling house is also 1,000 square feet bigger than mine. And the number 2 house beat us by like $10,000. But they also spent about $300,000 more in renovations than I did. Sale price is one great measure of performance and whatnot. But however, return on investment is, in my opinion, a better judge for financial returns. So we beat our stretch goal in our price, and the price that we obtained. We are thrilled. I'm exhausted as I couldn't sleep last night. I don't have much to complain about. I know many people are out there having much more challenges than I am, so I will never complain. Cherry and I also, we know we lead blessed lives. Shout out to Francisco Almeida for bringing us the winning offer and the bottle of champagne as a thank you. It's weird. We've had many moments in the last few months and weeks that we'd like to celebrate, but it's kind of weird that we're still in the lockdown. So going to a nice restaurant is out of the question. So I'll go order a nice bubble tea. I'm going to go over to the mall and order myself a bubble tea, a large papaya. I'm going to order 2 in case the kids or my wife want some, so I don't have to share. They can have their own. And what I'm going to do to celebrate is I'm going to go lift some weights tonight in our home gym. I'm going to move the staging furniture out of our eat-in kitchen, move my home gym stuff back into the kitchen where it was previous to staging, and I'll hopefully take some time up tonight to reflect on the journey. I hope you're all out there crushing it as well. 2021, I know, has started off with like a rocket for all you wealth hackers. For those who did it right, our real estate clients are reporting record price appreciation, and our stock hacker community is just killing it, with many having their best week ever this past week or this week even. And January has been a fantastic month for many, including myself. Our accounts are up over 14% this January so far. I'm recording this on the 26th. The month's not even over. The 14%. Extremely happy with that. What a game changer this has been. If you too would like to learn how I and our crazy successful real estate clients invest using the number one strategy in real estate investing, we offer free training online at www.investortraining.ca. If you type in your name and email there, you'll be emailed about the next live presentation that my team gives on how we invest in real estate for maximum returns. If you're already in real estate in some shape or form, and will never be a client of ours, that's totally cool, especially you realtors and mortgage professionals. If you're looking for the best side hustle, I haven't seen anything better than stock hacking for cash flow, real estate for building wealth, stock hacking for cash flow. I believe I'm only giving one more demonstration in February, this February. So to register for that, go to www.stockhackeracademy.ca/demo. Again, that's www.stockhackeracademy/demo. So on to this week's show, returning guest, and it's only been a short 5 years since episode 1 featuring Julie Broad. Well, she's back. I'm not nearly as nervous as I was then. And not much has changed in those 5 years, has it? Except that she left her dominant position as a real estate influencer in the Canadian influencer space in Canada. She was, I consider, the top coach at the time, to move to California and open a new business. She'll talk about that, the transition from going from real estate to moving to a different country, a very lovely country, lovely part of the country, especially. She still invests in real estate in Nanaimo, British Columbia, the left coast. I know many of you are looking for more left coast content, but she's here today to share about her new book coming out, share why everyone needs to write a book. And I completely agree. My book is still in progress. And a few how-tos to make your book a good one so that people will read it, maybe even pay for it. She's the author of More Than Cash Flow, which is still a top 3 to 5 real estate book in my opinion. So without further ado, I give you Julie Broad. Hi, Julie.
What's hey, Erwin.
Busy these days?
Oh, it's actually fun. We should mention that I was on your podcast before. Do you want to talk about the first time I was on your podcast?
Yes, you were number 1.
I own that title proudly, by the way. I was number 1.
Yeah, you were episode number 1. I was incredibly nervous, because this is kind of like public speaking. Like I joke, and people who've been listening for the last little bit, they know that I joke that I say no one's listening. Back then, truly no one was listening. I was still nervous as heck. Listenership's grown a little bit since 2016. Episode 1 with Julie Broad. And no, I've had you back since then, haven't I?
No, I don't think so. I think that's the only time I was on your podcast. And it's crazy to think.
I think you did,
yeah.
Yeah, you were just really knee deep in your launch of your new business.
And that's the funny part when you think about it. 2016, I was doing something totally different in a totally different place. So it's kind of wild.
Mm-hmm. Let's touch on that on 2016 Julie Broad. Because the 2016 Julie Broad and Dave Pena that I knew were in my opinion, you guys were the top real estate coaches at the time. Just as an observer and working with your coaching clients, they were dynamos. So then I would keep referring people to you, and then they become dynamos. And I don't know if it's right or not. I often judge the quality of a coach based on the quality of their students. I've had people fault me on that, like that's not the coach's fault. It's not that. I'm like, I don't know. How else am I supposed to judge?
Well, I mean, because I would never take credit for the people, and just like I wouldn't take the blame if somebody didn't do well. So I don't know if there is a correlation for sure, but I don't know if it's, a direct, good coach means all of their, students are going to be great, because a lot of people just don't take action. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that did set us apart was we were really action focused. So we attracted people who were going to take action. So our clients were more likely to succeed. And it is fun now, 5 years later, seeing what some of them have done. And now, they're running big companies. They're doing so many great investments. It's quite cool. So, but thank you. I do appreciate you saying that. And it was, we were doing tons of real estate coaching. We were doing lots of real estate investing, but we did start, and I mentioned this to you in the email, I started investing in real estate in 2001. So I've been doing this for 20 years. So you could see why come, 2017, we were kind of like, hey, let's do something different.
Was it just Was whose decision was it to do something different?
Well, Dave started acting in about 2015 or so. He started to
Mhm,
kind of take acting classes and pursue that career. And that was really, real estate is wonderfully repeatable and wonderfully boring if you're doing it right. And so, if you have that kind of entrepreneurial personality and you want to always be challenging yourself, it can
mhm,
be boring. I mean, it's great wealth creation, but
mhm,
it's boring. And so he started acting. And as he got into acting, he was working on the coaching business less. And I relied
mhm,
on him very heavily for the numbers. He was a mortgage broker in the past, and I wanted him to work with our clients to analyze the financials on the
mhm,
deals,
mhm,
whereas I was all about the marketing, the communication, the raising money, all that kind of stuff. But as a team, we worked, and so as he pulled away, I didn't want to be running this company by myself.
mhm,
And we looked at hiring people and training them, but ultimately it was just time for a change, and his acting was a good reason
mhm,
for me to take a step back from our training and education company and really go,
mhm,
okay, what's next?
mhm.
And that's what led me to creating the company that I run now, which is Book Launchers.
Right,
And
right.
if I look at my life, as a kid I wanted to be a writer, but people told me writers don't make money, and
Mhm,
so I went to business school. And I did an undergrad in commerce and a post grad. I did an MBA in finance and real estate and got into real estate. But real estate also brought me back to writing. I started
mhm,
writing a real estate investing newsletter and then wrote my first book, More Than Cash Flow. And that really was kind of the start of
mhm,
building Book Launchers. And I
mhm,
didn't know it at the time, but it's kind of really where we what led us to where we are today.
mhm. So that was a mouthful you just said. Shout out to More Than Cash Flow. I still believe it's one of the first books any new investor should read. Is this still people can still get it?
Oh, yeah, and it's still selling. I mean, considering I don't market it at
Yeah,
all,
yeah.
it still sells a decent amount of copies every month. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's passive income. It's one of the few things that is it really is passive. I get money, I do nothing.
Right. So More Than Cash Flow, where can folks get it?
Amazon chapters, I mean, it's everywhere books are sold, both in Canada and the US.
What was eye-opening about that book is I think it was the first book that actually shared the not so pretty side of being a real estate investor. Because every other book I read was like, oh yeah, you screen tenants and they're great. The numbers on this property hit this ratio, it's great.
Right? And that was,
Oh,
what
wrong.
it's so wrong. In fact, the better the numbers, usually the worse the
Worse.
property.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and that was part of, why I wrote the book was I had read almost every real estate book that was
Mhm,
out there. And
mhm,
one of the challenges was there wasn't a lot of variety in the Canadian, like specific to Canadian real estate.
mhm, mhm.
But the other challenge was exactly what you're saying was it made you as a real estate investor feel like you must be doing something wrong because you've got problem tenants, you've
Yeah.
got properties, you've got all these things that are actually really common problems. But at
Mhm,
the time, there wasn't a lot of people talking about all those problems.
mhm,
And so I knew this book was really needed. Interestingly, in conversations with publishers, they disagreed. They thought that, they didn't need a general real estate book. They needed more like specific niche topics. But I kept thinking nobody had written this kind of a book. And so ultimately I ended up self-publishing. And I
mhm,
did so much better. And this is kind of, what leads me into Book Launchers today was not only financially did I do better, but I wrote the book that I knew needed to be written. And I made, well, I think I did the math. It was a while ago now, but when I did the math, I would have made about $8,000 in royalties had I gotten a traditional book deal. Whereas I made, more than at the time, like $83,000 in book sales. And that was the book sales that you can track. I sold a lot of books in the back of the room kind of scenarios where, I'd buy the book and then sell it for $20 at these events. So there was a lot of those kind of sales as well. So it was easily six figures at the time from book sales where I would have made less than $10,000. It
mhm,
was not just money either. Like it was actually writing the things that I knew needed to be said and not being censored by a publisher, and ultimately owning the rights because
mhm,
we have friends that, had to buy the rights to their book back in order to go through, trying to potentially turn it into a TV show. And there's another book that we all know that got republished under other people's names.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same book, but because he was no longer in the real estate space, Wiley decided to republish it. And they have the rights to do that. Like, all of your intellectual property belongs to the publisher when you do a book deal. And so
Mm-hmm.
these things were all eye-opening for me.
Mm-hmm. I have a friend who using a publisher in Canada. He's an American, and
Mm-hmm.
they won't return his call. Yet his book is completely sold out. I keep bugging him, like, hey, people are trying to buy your book, and you can only get it on Kindle and Audible, right? There's still
Mm-hmm.
people who want the book, and the publisher will not call them back, which is absolutely bonkers.
And the other part that's scary, and we've had a lot of clients come to us this year whose publishers went out of business.
Mhm.
And so the rights revert back to the author, but the author doesn't have access to their book. They have to now recreate their book in a lot of cases, and then they have to republish it and figure it all out from scratch. And so that's the other thing, is a publisher can go out of business, and then what are your rights at that point, and what do you
Mhm.
have for your assets?
Mhm.
Because that's happened a lot in the last year, and it
Mhm.
happens more than you want to think. So there's other considerations like that too.
Fascinating. And that's kind of like, I think large part of why I got into entrepreneurship and real estate investing. Like Greg Capture says it beautifully, is that what he realized was that all real estate investors they're entrepreneurs, just that
Hmm.
they're in the real estate industry. And a lot of us got into it because we wanted control, right? It ain't fun being a landlord, but we have a lot
No.
more control of our futures.
Yeah. And that's the same with self-publishing. I mean,
Mhm.
ultimately, at the time I kind of thought I had to be chosen and I needed to be given the, permission or whatever a publisher gives you.
Mhm.
But self-publishing, you have control. Like,
Mhm.
you're the one that makes final decision. You take the risk, but ultimately, to me, it's your intellectual property,
Mhm.
and that's one of your biggest assets, and you really
Mhm.
should own and control it.
Mhm. Oh, and also something that reminds me about the book was you talked about a very, very common marketing practice in the States, and then you gave your own personal experience using it, which I thought was phenomenal. Because I think it was around the same time. Because I think you were into that. You had already gone down that path before I first saw it, and then I first saw it. Everyone was talking about it. Blah blah blah. Yellow letters. Blah blah blah. Like, this is the
Yep.
greatest thing ever. And like, Julie doesn't think so.
Well, we had the police come to our door twice, right? Like, knock, knock, knock. What are you guys up to? Like, it
Huh.
was, yeah, it was quite the experience. And as I dug into it, I found out other people had run into these things too. They thought we were trying to scam seniors, but I mean, you just buy a postal code and you mail letters out to everybody in that postal code. You don't know who it's going to,
Mhm,
but people
mhm.
automatically assume it's some sort of a scam. And yeah, it was. I don't even know if we ever bought a house from that. I think we got one house through all the money and time and effort that went into the yellow letters. I think we only
Mhm.
ended up buying one house.
Did that happen when you were living in Nanaimo, or were you living in Toronto before?
Vancouver. Yeah, we did live
Always
in Toronto for 5 years, but yeah,
right.
this is when we were in Vancouver.
Okay, okay. And then can we talk about the journey from Vancouver to Hollywood? Is that accurate?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we went from Vancouver to Nanaimo to Los Angeles. Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. Because
Yeah, I mean, what do you want to hit on? There's lots of places I could take that one.
there's some things that I want the listener to know. Because you mentioned in 2015 Dave was acting.
Mhm.
Now, was this a money thing? Because he was making so much more money than real estate. That's why I made the financial decision made a lot of sense.
No, acting
Because
doesn't
I
pay.
just want to touch on there's all these influencers that say, like, follow your passion, you'll never work another day in your life. Well, there's things I'm passionate about, but they don't pay me much money. I still need to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, no, acting doesn't pay. I mean, there's certainly a percentage of the acting population that makes money, but the vast majority, I mean, he can be on all set on day. Let me try that sentence all over again. He can be on set all day and make $250. Like, he works. He doesn't do it for the money at all.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, that's a whole different thing, but he loves it. He lights up and he absolutely loves it. And he's fortunate enough, real estate provided us a foundation that allows us to pursue
Mhm,
things like that.
mhm,
It would have been tough to go act before we had the
mhm.
foundation that real estate had provided us.
Right,
That would have been a tough way to go, but having the real estate does allow you the freedom to kind of pursue things like that.
right. Is that the same? Jumping all over the place, but is that the lesson you'll teach your son as well? You kind of need to. have a base before he can go pursue these dreams?
Maybe. I don't know. It's interesting to ask that because I do see there's a practicality to life, right? You do have to address the need to pay your bills and have a roof over your head and have food. At the same time, I do feel like there is a limitation parents put on their kids by encouraging them first to pursue money, like what's going to get a job that's going to pay you.
Hmm.
So I would rather step back and kind of see where things take him, and, at points when he may be, needing guidance, I'll be there to ask questions. But I really want to be careful and let his life evolve. Plus, because the other thing is being in Los Angeles, I can tell you, people are making money doing everything, like everything. There is
Okay.
in my office building, there are people who are probably 20 years old. I don't know. And all they do all day is play video games. And I don't know what they're making, but I can tell you what they're wearing. It's not cheap. They get catered meals every day, and all they do is play video games. So, I mean, you might tell your kids to get off the video games and go do something, but they actually could make a really great living doing it. So, as a parent, I really want to be careful because I don't know. Look at how much the world's changed in the last 10 years, 20 years. I don't know what the next careers are going to be, what's going to be the
Hmm.
next great business ideas that are going to come
Hmm.
up and be needed. So I kind of want to stay out of it as much as I can. But yes, there's still a practicality to it. And of course, we have to make sure that we can eat. But as parents, I think it's our job to support and let their life unfold.
Hmm. Hmm. So was Dave always passionate about acting, or was this happened to come later in life?
When we met, he was taking acting classes, but again, it's kind of that practicality of life. Is he went, oh, well, this is going to go nowhere, and he really focused on his career, and
Hmm.
then we got into real estate investing. So he kind of left it behind. But
Hmm.
just like writing for me, it was always there. As kids, he and his friends used to shoot commercials. They had, like Betamax camera, and they
Hmm.
used to shoot these silly commercials, and they actually had a dummy dragged behind a car, and they had this scene where the it was like cops and robbers type scene they filmed, and yeah, so it's ingrained in him too. It's just a really tough industry.
Well, I, I don't know how many times I said it. Thank God for real estate.
Right. Yeah, it's been great, and it's been a fun adventure. And honestly, I think I've loved California more than he has. We moved down there largely for his acting, but ultimately for me,
Yeah.
launching book launchers down there, I
Hmm.
hired Emmy award winning people, Emmy nominated people. People applied for the job with the company when there was almost no clients, because that's just kind of the environment it is. Like, people love startups, they love new things, they love creating. And whereas Canada is way more conservative, and you'd have a really hard time as an unknown company attracting tremendous talent. So there was a lot of advantages for me, and the weather's phenomenal, the people are great. It kind of has that vibe that I've
Hmm.
always wanted. Whereas for him, because we've been back in Canada thanks to the virus, he's actually getting more auditions here in Canada than he did in the States. So,
What are you gonna do?
oh, I'm going
So,
back. I mean, who knows? You never know where life will take you. But I mean, I feel like I have to go back. It's just I love it there, and it's kind of where I'm drawn to be. And things for me are much more productive in California.
cool. Okay. So, and this is supposed to be a real estate podcast, but I think it's fascinating because you have lived in Toronto for most of your life, right? And then
We only lived in Toronto for 5 years, so we're
wait, we're
West
talking about
Coasters.
West. That's right,
Yeah,
right, right.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
But that's a good amount of time. You have a good feel for the city. Then you've lived
Mhm.
in Vancouver, and then you lived in Nanaimo, and you're saying your preference uh, is Hollywood the right? Is that the right place that you live?
Los Angeles, Hollywood's a like kind of like Oakville is to Toronto.
Yeah,
Hollywood
yeah.
is that to Los Angeles. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I,
And
I,
California is kind of, for me, it's not necessarily Los Angeles. Los Angeles has tremendous amount of traffic. I walk, so I live in a little happy bubble. I walk to my office. I can almost walk to my gym. I usually drive. It's like I live in a bubble where I don't have to drive. So I think it's phenomenal.
mhm.
When you get in the car, you no longer like Los Angeles usually. But, we're 7 minutes from the beach. The weather is where we are is temperate. It's, usually 20, somewhere in the 20s, pretty much
Mm-hmm.
all year round.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's also the vibe, like the entrepreneurial vibe, the startup culture. A lot of that stuff is everybody wants to help you succeed in business, and they
Mm-hmm.
love people who are creating. And it's just that kind of a environment that Canada doesn't quite have. We don't have it in the culture like they do down there.
Interesting. Well, how far are you from Silicon Valley?
Well, it's 6 hours south. So, but I mean, it really
This is
the
this is the ignorant Canadian talking about U.S. geography.
right. It's usually the other way around. But the thing
Yeah.
is, the area that we're in is called Silicon Beach because San Francisco's gotten so expensive that there's Google and Facebook and are in the neighborhood, and Pinterest was on the floor of the office building that I was in, my first office when I was there. So it's very much a tech driven, as much tech as acting in many cases. It's still very much the entertainment industry there, but there is more diversity in industry there. And it's also been great for books because besides the talent that you can attract, you also get a lot of really fascinating stories.
Mhm.
And so you get books that aren't just the same real estate book or the same health and fitness book. There's a lot of variety in the stories and
Mhm.
the cool experience that people bring to the table.
So when you moved, was the plan from you? I know Dave was wanting to be in LA for his acting career. Was that was this just a pivot because book launch? Was that just a pivot because you wanted a new challenge?
Mhm. Largely, I mean, so we started off needing a visa to get there. And so I started looking at buying a business down in LA. And so I spent many weeks down here looking at businesses. And ultimately, I kept going back to why don't I just create the business I would want to work for? Uh, because if I'm going to spend my days doing this, why not have it be fun? And the book side of things has been there for a long time because I saw firsthand the massive benefits to writing a book, both for my business. I mean, our coaching business really took off after the book came out, but we also raised millions of dollars from people who read the book and said, I want to invest with you. So it had massive benefits for both businesses. It even had family benefits. Like I think our families read it and understood us better. So, it sounds funny, but it's true. And so I saw all of that, and then I ended up helping a lot of people with their books through our coaching business, coaching other real estate investors that were writing books. But then I wrote chapters for other people's books, was interviewed, even did content edits on one, and I started to see the gap in the need. And for me, it was kind of like, okay, this is something I've always loved. This is where I'm passionate. I did this without charging people because I thought it was so fun. So why not see if there's a business? And all of it, I could see this massive gap in the market where traditionally published authors get a deal when they have a marketing plan that shows the publisher they're going to sell books. Self-published authors typically write the book and then go, how am I going to sell this book? And the problem is that the gap there is why a lot of self-published authors don't sell is because they write a book without figuring out the marketing first. And so I created a company where from the very first time we talked to you, we're trying to figure out how we're going to help you sell this book. Who's your market? What's the hook? How are you going to be different? What's that one thing that people are going to go, this book, kind of like you said, this book actually talked about the bad things that commonly happen but nobody talk about, right? So what's that one thing that's going to make you stand out? So we figure that out, and then we bake into the process research and keywords and marketing pieces that really set you up for success, so that when you go to market your book, you're set, and we help you market it, so you're set up for a better foundation. That didn't exist. There was nobody doing it with marketing in mind. And that gap was almost, once you see it, you can't unsee that. And I knew I could solve it. So I created the company I would want to work for
Mhm.
and that I
Mhm.
would want to hire if I was ever going to do this again.
So this show is for real estate investors, and we were talking before we started recording about who listens. So what I think people, about the 12 people that listen, sure, 2 of them are realtors, at least 2 of them are real estate investors, 2 of them are
Mm-hmm.
probably complete novices, might be a mortgage broker in there. So speak to these people. Why do they need a book?
Yeah. So
Hopefully they've all read one before.
yeah, I mean, even if you haven't, you could still write a book. It's just harder. But yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, I always go back to the tremendous value that it brought to the businesses that we were in.
Mhm.
And especially as a realtor, how do you stand out? Like, how do you stand out in your market as a mortgage broker? How do you stand out? Even as an investor, the credibility that that book brought us, and we didn't write it. In fact, because we were telling so many mistakes, I honestly didn't think people would want to invest with us after they read the book. So I didn't write it with that thought in mind at all. But they get to know you. And so two things happen that are really cool. One is there's no sales cycle, right? So, you don't have to build credibility and build rapport and do all those things that you have to do to get a client, because they read your book and they either like you and trust you or they don't. And if they like you and trust you and want to work with you, they call you up and they want to work with you. Like, there's no sales involved. It's your decision whether you work with them or not. And that was the case on the investment side as well as on our training and education side. So done right, that book is the best sales tool you will ever create, and it lasts a lifetime. Which is the other thing I think people need to be aware of is you don't have to put this pressure on yourself that it has to be this perfect book, but know that it's going to last forever. So you want it to be something that you're proud of, and it's worth investing in creating a great book so that you have it. And when people tell you 7 years later that they still recommend your book, you can feel proud and know that, that's a book you want people still reading.
And then, where do people get stuck?
Well, Erwin, where do people get stuck?
Time.
Mm-hmm.
For someone like me, I probably spend a little bit too much time in my head. Mm-hmm. So it's the time commitment. Not believing that people want to read what you think. I'm sure people have self-limiting beliefs that they don't think that anyone will read it, including myself. That if you even have value to offer, things like imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
What am I missing?
Yeah, I call them your monsters in the closet. And some people are afraid of failure. They're afraid of success. They're afraid of what people think, and they're afraid they won't matter. So, I mean, you kind of hit most of them. And a lot of those things do hold people back. And I always take people back to, think about the one reader that needs to hear this. And you, of all people, have massive value to offer. But most people do if you're talking to the right reader. Right. So that's the key, is that message market match, is making sure that who you want to talk to is the person that's really going to get the most value out of what you have to say. And focusing on that reader really helps you keep the monsters in your closet, and not focus on the monsters, right? If you focus on yourself, this is one of the challenges with a lot of the marketing in this industry, is they focus on you being the bestseller, you being the person that's now everybody looks to as the go-to person. That's a lot of pressure to carry with yourself, versus focusing on the reader that you want to help with the book. That can really take some of that pressure off and focus on the person that needs to read your book. And again, going back to kind of the benefits, the other benefit of this is it gives you clarity of what you're talking about and clarity of message, which helps you in everything that you do. Because when you can communicate better, because the hard work of a book is thinking it through, which is the time constraint. The time constraint's real. You can put out a book really fast. You can write a book fast. You can get somebody else to write a book for you fast, but you miss out on that clarity of message, which is a really big selling feature, because you'll communicate much clearer going forward. We've had clients who haven't finished writing their book and their business starts exploding because they've just found a few cool ways to explain what they do that they struggled to explain before, but they did that through their book. And so that can help tremendously on that. But yeah, I mean, ultimately you have to just believe. You just have to get out of your own way, or hire people who will just push you to get it done, and really trust them when they say this is good.
I think of like people who want to be content creators, and it's actually Tom Karadz that always told us, choose whatever medium you like. If you like Instagram, do Instagram.
Yeah.
If you like podcasting, do podcasting. If you like blogging, do blogging. So what do you tell the person who's not a writer?
I mean, you don't have to be. In fact, I would say very few of our clients are people I would call writers. I don't even consider myself a writer, even though I love it. You don't have to be the one that writes your book either. We have people who assist you, and there's this kind of thing that happens for some people is they feel like, well, if I haven't sat there and labored over the typing, then I didn't really write it. But the book does not exist without you, especially the way we do it. There's no words that go on the page that haven't come from you. So you have to talk it out, or they'll take podcasts and kind of extract some of the stuff from the podcast and then interview you in between. You don't have to be the one that does the typing, but you do have to be the one that does the thinking. And that's the piece that does come back. But it doesn't have to be you. That we had one client who voice noted the book. So they'd be driving home from work, voice noting the next chapter and send it to the writer, and the writer would write it. Eventually they have to read it, but that's how the book was extracted. So the thinking, the car was where they did their thinking. So the car was where they talked, and that's how the book got done.
That's often where people are listening to this podcast. So you're kind of eating
in the car.
The attention space.
Sorry. Listen to the podcast on your way to work, and on your way home, send the voice note.
So simple as that, right? Yeah, with technology the way it is, like for example, you're wearing AirPods, you just turn on the memo app and just talk if that's your preferred medium. That easy, huh?
Exactly. It's not, again, you hit the point, which is it's your own self that gets in your way, because you can create a book on 2 to 5 hours a week. And most of us, for something that's really important to us, most of us can find 2 to 5 hours a week. It's mostly possible. There's certainly times in your life where there isn't even 2 to 5 hours a week, but it's very rare. So it's the thinking part, and wherever you're going to do your thinking is probably where you want to do your writing, whatever writing looks like for you.
Right. Because for example, people listen to this podcast often on walks or when they're commuting. That's often their downtime. Or some people are probably listening to this while they're cooking. Maybe you don't. Yeah. Maybe I don't know. I personally couldn't think while I'm cooking, but I probably could when I'm on a walk.
Yeah.
I could probably be dictating for my book purposes. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Agreed. But yeah, I don't think I could. I think there'd be a lot of burnt food and a lot of missed ingredients if I tried to do it while cooking too.
Handling of sharp objects going wrong.
Right.
So this is a real estate show. Tell us a bit about LA. Did you rent or buy? Have you invested in anything?
Yeah, so we're renting, and what a crazy market. So it's not annual leases, it's kind of random numbers. So you'll get this offer to lease, and it'll be 9 months, 15 months, 18 months, and differing rent rates based on however long you're staying, and based on their prediction. I'm not kidding. Their prediction of where they think the market's going to go. So our first apartment. And so we're talking, our first apartment was 2 bedrooms. I mean, we're in a nice neighborhood, but not like, it's not super high end. It's not gated community or anything. And we paid $3,800 US for this 2-bedroom apartment. When our offer to renew came back, they were, the highest rent option was 4,800. I think was what it was. I'm trying to remember. Dave would know the exact numbers. It was that, like, we had a choice between I think a 700 per month rent increase or a 900 per month rent increase. And if you wanted to go open-ended, so just month to month, I think it was $7,000. So really crazy market.
Right?
No, this is for a 2-bedroom apartment. 2 bedrooms. 1,100 square feet. No view, nothing, like not on the ocean, nowhere. So yeah, it's the same everywhere you go. There's the rent increases are insanity, and it's really hard. So when we go back, we intend to be buying, but buying's ugly there too. I mean, you're looking at 1,200 or 1.2 million for a 2-bedroom house. Not a fixer upper, but I mean nothing. Right?
2-bedroom house.
2-bedroom house. 1.2. And to be in a neighborhood that you don't have to have bars on your windows. It's the market's very high there. I'm actually really grateful for this last year because it's tempered the market, because a lot of people have left these big cities because they haven't had to stay there. The offices are changing how they work. So the market has gone down a bit. It'll be interesting. We've been watching it closely to see, but our investments are still Canadian. We're still focused on the Canadian market for investing. And we haven't done a lot of acquisitions. We've been just holding and managing.
And your holdings are primarily Nanaimo, right?
Yeah.
No interest in the States?
No, I mean, I don't consider ourselves real estate investors right now. We're
Hmm.
really focused, the business and having an almost 4-year-old now. That's plenty for me at
Hmm.
this stage in the game.
Hmm.
And, Dave's starting a new career and still managing our real estate. So not at this point. And it's complicated when you've got a visa. You never know if it's going to be renewed. And so there's lots of complications. So
Hmm. Hmm.
we're not going to force it right now.
Well, I don't know how much you need to force. I think I saw, I was Googling, I think the greater Vancouver area is up 25% year over year. I don't know how hard you have to work for that.
Well, I mean, yes, but we also have commercial property, and it's been atrocious.
Oh.
It's we have a 30,000 square foot office building that went vacant in January, so before the virus hit. So you try releasing a office building in the current environment. So yeah, yes, we've had some wonderful days on the residential side. However, we moved into commercial in our final few years when we were still pursuing that, and it's been a really, really hard year for that. So we've just been, I mean, really, we're bleeding. There's no other way to kind of describe what's gone on with that property. And
Hmm.
we've pursued so many options, and yeah, it's been hard. So yes, there's good and bad to every situation, which is always my
Hmm.
point. I'm like, there's choices, there's things that are going really well, there's things that aren't. It's kind of like finding your groove despite what gets thrown at you.
Why doesn't Dave just open his own film studio? 30,000 square feet. Like, was that one tenant?
No, there was largely it was a medical clinic, medical office building. So it was a big doctor's office, and then there was a Life Labs that was not part of it, but tied to it. And then we have little others. There's a few other little tenants that still remain. So the entire building isn't vacant, but the vast majority of it is vacant.
Yikes. It's funny because like everyone always viewed commercial as like the next level for us residential investors. Yeah, yeah. Who saw this coming?
Yeah,
uh,
it is. And it's kind of, if I was still in this space, I would probably write a book about it because of what you just said. A lot of people really tout commercial as better. It's
mhm,
just different, right? And
yeah.
I said this before we even got too deep into commercial, was we knew you had to have deeper pockets because just
Mhm,
buying commercial is more expensive.
mhm,
The appraisals and the property environmental testing and all that stuff that has to
mhm,
happen before you even buy it
mhm.
is incredibly expensive. But yeah, it's almost like there's another book.
Well,
Because the other side of this too is when you have investment partners, which we do on a lot of our properties, and you move to a new country and you are the man. Like there's a whole other conversation around what happens when people who were relying on you to be the eyes and the boots on the ground, overseeing their investments, when you not only leave that city but now you've left the country,
mhm.
how that goes. So there's definitely a lot to talk about there. What not to do, what to do, and things to think about, because you never know where your life is going to take you. um,
Mhm.
if you're open to opportunity, like many entrepreneurs are, you may not be doing the thing that you're doing today 5 years from now.
Speaking of other books, is there a book for book launchers? Do you have a book that promotes book launchers?
I'm so glad you asked. February 23rd, I have a book coming out called Self Publish and Succeed. It's book one of two. The second book will probably be in 2022, but this book is how to write a book, a no boring book, because I'm really all about writing engaging books that people want to read. So, it's all about writing a not a boring book that will sell. So it's this whole principle of thinking about what's going to sell your book before you write it, the book launcher's way.
I'm laughing because I think my book's boring.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the challenge. So especially coming to the real estate audience, the challenge is making your book interesting when, if you're talking about real estate, it's a lot of the same things, right? How do you pick a property? How do you screen tenants? How do you do, and a lot of people have already talked about it. So what are you bringing to the table that makes it a little bit interesting or unique? I mean, in your case, we've talked about this before. You have tremendous story, tremendous angles you could take. That you bring value in other ways with the lens and the cool things that you've done with what real estate has done for you. So there's lots of angles. There's always a new way, but if you're talking about stuff that's already been said before, you absolutely have to find what makes you unique and what you're saying that somebody else hasn't already said. So it's really what my this book that's coming out in February, what we talk about, and what we do at the company too, is help you
Mhm,
figure that part out.
mhm. Now, what's running through my head is I'm thinking, the listeners thinking, oh, there's podcasts. Or I'm listening to this on a podcast. What do I need a book for? So I actually remember reading from Tim Ferriss, and he actually wrote, yes, he has a massive podcast following, but his own words were, he's done more business off of his books than off of his podcasts. That's pretty
Mm-hmm.
impressive for someone who's
Yep.
sold a lot of copies and someone who has a massive podcast following.
Yeah. Dave Asprey said something very similar as well. And he said that once somebody reads his book, I can't remember the exact number, but it was like they buy 2 or 3 times more product from them. So even if it's a customer, once they read his book, they're now buying two to 3 times more from them once they've read the book. So books are incredibly powerful. The other thing to think about is media. You're not getting on the media because you're a podcaster. You get on the media because you're the author of X book. It has the credibility of a degree in a lot of spaces, and in many cases it's better than a degree, because in most industries you're competing with people who all have the exact same degree that you have, whereas if you've written the book on a certain subject, you're the only one that's done that. And so that sets you miles apart. And again, that's why I think it's really powerful for people who are raising capital, doing real estate deals in any way, because it sets you apart. And then I'll just touch on this because this comes up in spaces like, the networks that we hang around with. They go, well, everybody I know has a book. I'm like, not 1% of the population has written a book. So if everybody has written a book, then you're the only one that hasn't. So you better get your work. You better get to work.
Yeah. Yeah, they're doing push-ups, so I got to do something different. Yeah, invent another exercise that's better than push-ups. Oh, Julie, you're making me frustrated that I have to do a better book. So what kind of angles? So the majority of our listeners, the 6 people that are listening, most of them are real estate investors. What should they be sharing in a book? What makes their book interesting?
Yeah. So find that unique. I mean, usually your story, bringing it in, will help a lot. Or in some cases, it can be what your real estate has done for you, what it's done for others. If you're a realtor and you're trying to encourage clients to come to you, what do you do that's a little bit different? Or how do you help people that's a little bit different? And this is where people make the mistake of going too general. So, as much as I said my book was general, Wiley was telling me it wouldn't sell because it was general. What Wiley didn't know that I knew was that none of these other real estate books actually talked about the mistakes right at the time. So I was okay with a general book. I also had tremendous support from folks like you and Nick and Tom Kradza, and a lot of people who really rallied behind the book, which helped me. But finding that unique thing. So going niche is a really smart thing when you're an unknown name, because you can be the person known for this. So maybe you become the 1-bedroom condo specialist and you feel like, well, that's really limiting me. But you become that person who's always like on call to talk about the 1-bedroom condo. And that's just the first example that popped in my head. But being a specialist when you write a book is tremendously powerful. And so I always encourage people. So if you want to write the book about a single marketplace, why not? Right? You can always write about other markets if you want to do that. There's always ways. If it's not your story, then it's your expertise. And you may know a lot more than you ever put into that first book. But the point is to get known and be heard with that first book so that it opens the door for other opportunities.
I mean, can you share some stories on how people have been successful with their book, especially specific to the real estate area? Oh, Roger. I had Roger on the show.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I haven't heard from him in a little while now.
Really?
Like people kind of fly, it's like birds out of a nest, right? They fly out of the nest and then you don't always see them. But yeah, his story is incredible. What an incredible guy. And he wrote the book with the goal of just helping someone, right? Like it really, and genuinely, like that is what he wrote the book for. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I'll have to listen to the episode. I didn't realize he was on the show. But yeah, I mean, we had one person the other day he's not real estate per se. He's kind of personal finance, but he got a company to work with him. That's $116 million a year revenue company. And he said, that's because of my book. Like, he's like, the only reason they worked with me was because of my book. And we've had realtors who say 2 deals and my book is paid for. So they're thrilled when they get, the one I'm thinking of, 3 clients, and that was the last I heard from him. But 3 clients came from his book. His book was paid for and he was like off to the races, and he didn't
Mm-hmm.
even do a lot with his book. He really just he didn't market it much. He just like handed it out to people.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have done even more if he was using it the
Right,
way we
right.
recommend using it.
Right, and just to touch on folks for the listener is Roger Auger, who was on the show and who had your help in
Mhm.
producing that book.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know Roger, I believe he shared it. Like he was hit by a car, not his own fault. The car drove onto the sidewalk and hit him, and that I believe that's what hinders him from being able to write. Right, like
Yeah.
speaking, he's fine, but
Yeah.
transferring that to the keyboard's different.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's still it's his book. It's all his words because he just spoke it out, and we
Mm-hmm.
essentially helped him with it. And yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example of somebody who, and he wrote some of it too because he would actually somehow type it out. I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe he uses voice to text. So that's the other thing, right? Is there's lots of ways to get the book on the page, and his book I think is called No Excuses. So there you go. There really is no excuses.
Yeah, someone who had trouble passing high school wrote a book.
Hmm.
And the feedback,
Exactly.
yeah, I've heard from him. The feedback's been outstanding.
And that's I do some videos where we interview on my YouTube channel. We interview authors, and the most common thing I say, "What's the thing that surprised you the most since your book came out?" It's kind of my standard question, and they almost always get emotional. Is they're just like, "I can't believe the people who reach out and thank me for my book, that I've made a difference in somebody's life." And you kind of expect people to answer it with, "Oh, I got this speaking engagement and I sold 500 books and I couldn't believe that." But that's never the answer. The answer of what surprised them is always the emotional impact they've had on other people's lives because they shared their
Hmm.
story.
Hmm. Yeah, because I've been friends with Roger for years. I didn't know about many of these stories.
The mac and cheese one is the one that
Like,
stands out in my head. Yeah, he
oh,
was selling stolen mac and cheese door to door.
you read his book?
Oh
Oh.
yeah.
So for the listener who hasn't listened to that episode, uh, Roger's father, who's since passed, he acquired a truckload of mac and cheese that they stored in someone's garage. I think it was theirs,
Yeah, I
and
think it was their garage.
yeah, and Roger being a minor, not understanding right or wrong, or I don't think they ever disclosed to him where they got it from. He was selling the mac and cheese door to door for, of course, cents on the dollar. Um,
And
Crazy.
then the police showed up at the
The police
door.
showed up. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I mean, incredible stories, but yeah, that's the story that stands out to me every time.
yeah, like these were his parents, yet he's still managed to be really successful. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to be successful in the real estate space, and that's why I always tell people I'm not a rocket science, just grind scientist. It's the economics behind it that kind of drove the decision.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's similar with a book. I mean, really, you don't have to understand books. You don't have to be a rocket science to write a great book to have a powerful impact. We have another client who was when he was a baby and he
Mhm,
was in his mom's stomach and he was the subject of a murder trial in
mhm,
his town. And like his whole life in a town. So imagine growing up in a small town where your grandfather killed a policeman and you were part of their defense as the baby. And that's what you're born into. And he does a lot of real estate as well, and risen up to be very successful. And his kind of message is, he thinks he called it it's the unlucky sperm club, but he really thinks, it doesn't matter what circumstances you're given, that's your fuel for the rest of your life. And it's all in how you use what you've been given.
mhm,
And so, yeah, it's not rocket science. It's really focusing on what you've got in front of you and where you're trying to go and figuring out, okay, I've got this. I want to get there. How do I get there? Right? What do I
mhm,
need?
mhm. Oh, and then that's just really nice segue because I was just thinking, have you read Dan Sullivan's Who Not How? It's a pretty recent book.
I don't think I have. I've seen like snippets of people talking about it though. So you recommend
Oh,
it?
you'd like it as a way to sell your sell your services. Because my own thing, like a classic example when it's something around the home, and it's something I need to do, and it's taking me
Mhm.
more than 2 to 4 weeks to do it, I immediately hire someone else to do it. Right?
Yep.
I'm not the one to do it. I'm going to hire someone else to do it. And same thing, if someone's stuck on getting the book out of them, try something different.
Yeah.
Possibly hiring Julie and Brooke Launchers to get that book out of you rather than you just trying to, you know, the definition of an insanity is to do the same thing over and expect a different result.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
nobody can
So,
do a book on their own fully because nobody has all the skills that it takes, right? Like if yeah, it's I mean the editing alone takes different types of people to do good editing, and then you've got the creative side of book design, both interior and cover, let alone the writing side, right? So
mhm,
none of us are given a brain that would allow you to do a book from start to finish
mhm,
alone.
mhm. And the promoting of the book.
Yeah, that's the next piece, right? You got to write it. That's the first obstacle to overcome, and then the second obstacle is that promotion piece, which is fun if you look at it that way, but a lot of people don't. They look at it as the hard part, telling people. It feels like that you have to tell them how good you are and how great you are and pay attention to my fabulous book. So it's much easier to hire somebody else to tout yourself and tout your book for you.
Mhm.
And my team loves doing it. Like I've hired people who light up. They'll be like, oh, it's another meeting, and then as soon as I say, oh, tell me about so and so's book, and they're like, oh, well, and they just launch into it. So that's what you want. You want people who can do. If you don't like promoting yourself, you want people who light up when they talk about
Mhm.
you.
Mhm. Julie, it's 3 o'clock, so I want to honor your time. This has been a blast. Great catching up with you. Where can folks follow your journey in book launchers?
Yeah, I mean, to connect with me personally, juliebroad.com. That's my author website. It's got my new book information, but booklaunchers.com is where to go if you are interested in learning more about getting our help to help you write and publish and promote a nonfiction book. Either way, would love to connect with the listeners who I know are far more than a dozen, Erwin. But every one of you is greatly appreciated. And I'm thankful that you had me back. It's been awesome to be back on your show and kind of reminisce a little bit.
I know it's crazy. Not much has changed, eh? You didn't have a kid when you were last on the show.
Didn't have a kid. I was in real estate completely. I
Yeah,
lived in Nanaimo.
yeah,
Yeah, life is so fun.
yeah. There was no pandemic. What a
No
world.
pandemic. Yeah, I'm not even thinking about that part.
Any final thoughts? Any final thoughts you want to share with the listener?
I mean, ultimately, my whole thing is always the missing piece is always action. So if you're thinking about writing a book, take some sort of action. Whatever you're thinking about doing, just take the first step forward because nothing's going to happen if you just think about it.
Amazing. All right, juliebroad.com, booklaunchers.com. Folks, I'll have all the links in the show notes in case you need to find it there. In case you're driving or cooking, you don't have to stop what you're
Right?
doing. We'll have the links for you. Julie, thanks again for doing this.
Thank you, Erwin. It's such a pleasure. Take care.
Awesome. Take care.